Life of David Livingston, Part 35. It's been supposed by Dr. Livingston that the waters of the Tanganyika Lake had outlet northward, and that they were, therefore, a part of the necessary vast sources of the great river of the continent, whose annual inundations are among the most wonderful illustrations in nature of the more than majestic power of Almighty God. His many discoveries of great lakes and rivers far to the westward of Tanganyika, their evident connection in a system similar to that of the Great Lakes of North America, at last forming the St. Lawrence River, flowing northward, the natural necessity there is for immense sources of supply to the Nile. These and other considerations left the explorer to imagine that Tanganyika formed a part of the same system with that lake, which he named after an illustrious president of the U.S. The commander of the Herald expedition, therefore, with a fine appreciation of the situation, offered his escort, Dr. Livingston, with a proposal to accompany him to the head of the lake. The offer was accepted, and the explorer, as Mr. Stanley says, like a hero, lost no time in starting. The account of this journey, or voyage, rather, for the party traveled by boat, is given in a dispatch dated December 23, 1871, at Ujiji. It is as follows. On the 20th of November, Dr. Livingston and your correspondent, with 20 picked men of the Herald Expedition Corps, started. Despite the assertion of Arabs that the Warundi were dangerous and would not let us pass, we hugged their coast closely, and when fatigued, boldly encamped in their country. Once only were we obliged to fly, and this was at the dead of night, from a large party which we knew to be surrounding us on the land side. We got to the boat safely, and we might have punished them severely had the doctor been so disposed. Once also we were stoned, but we paid no heed to them, and kept on keeping our way along their coast until we arrived at Makaba's, one of the chiefs of Usage. Makaba was at war with a neighboring chief who lived on the left bank of the Rutsitsi. That did not deter us, and we crossed the head of the Tanganyika to Mugihewa, governed by Ruhenga, brother of Makamba. Muhiwene is a tract of country on the right bank of the Rutsitsi, extending to the lake. With Makamba and Ruhinga we became most intimate. They proved to be sociable, good-natured chiefs, and gave most valuable information concerning the countries lying to the north of Usage, and if their information is correct, Sir Samuel Baker will be obliged to curtail the ambitious dimensions of his lake by 1 degree, if not more. A Mgwana living at Makamba's on the eastern shore of the lake had informed us that the river Ruditsi certainly flowed out of the lake, and after joining the Kittanangul emptied into the Lake Victoria. When we entered Ruhonga's territory of Mugahelua, we found ourselves about 300 yards from the river about which a great deal has been said and written. At Uniyembe, I was told that the Ruenzi was an affluent. I don't know what that means. The Ruenzi was an affluent. At Ujiji, all Arabs but one united in saying the same thing, and within 10 miles of the Ruenzi, a freedman of Zanzibar swore it was an affluent. On the morning of the 11th day of our departure from Ujiji, we were rowed towards the river. We came to a long, narrow bay, fringed on all sides with tall, dense reeds and swarming with crocodiles, and soon came to the mouth of the Ruitsi. As soon as we had entered the river, all doubt vanished before the strong, turbid flood against which we had all to contend in the ascent. After about 10 minutes, we entered in what seemed a lagoon, but which was the result of a late inundation. About an hour higher up the river, we began to be confined to its proper banks, and is about 30 yards broad, but very shallow. 2 days higher up, Rohingya told us the Ruitsi was joined by the Luanda, coming from the northwest. There could be no mistake then. Dr. Livingston and myself had ascended it and felt the force of the strong inflowing current. The Ruitsi was an influent as much so as the Malagaratsi and Linche and Rugufu. But with its banks full, it can only be considered as ranking third among the rivers flowing into the Tanganyika. Though rapid, it is extremely shallow. It has 3 mouths, but it has 3 mouths up which an ordinary ship's boat loaded might in vain attempt to ascend. Burton and Speck, though they ascended to within 6 hours' journey by canoe from the Ruitsi, were compelled to turn back by the cowardice of the boatmen. Had they ascended to Muete's capital, they could easily have seen the head of the lake. Usage is but a district of Wamdi, governed by several small chiefs who owe obedience to Muetzi, the great king of Wamdi. We spent 9 days at the head of the Tanganyika, exploring the islands and many bays that indent its shores. In returning to Ujiji, we coast along the west side of the Tanganyika as far as the country of the Wasanatsi, whom we had to leave on no amicable terms, owing to their hostility to Arabs, and arrived at Ujiji on the 18th of December, having been absent 28 days. Though the Rusizi River can no longer be a subject of curiosity to geographers, and we are certain that there is no connection between the Tanganyika and Baker Lakes, or the Albert Nyanza, it is not yet certain that there is no connection between the Tanganyika and the Nile. The west coast has not yet been explored, and there is reason to suppose that a river runs out of the Tanganyika, though the deep caverns of Kambogo Mountain through the deep caverns of Kambogo Mountain, far underground and out the western side of the Kabogo into the Lualaba or the Nile. Livingston has seen the river about 40 miles or so west of Kabogo, but he does not know that it runs out of the mountain. This is one of the many things which he has yet to examine. It thus appearing that the Ruzizi is an affluent, not an effluent, of Tanganyika Lake. The expedition failed to sustain the explorer's hypothesis, but added a useful item of geographical knowledge to the then existing stock. Nor does it follow that because the Ruizi flows into the Tanganyika, there is no river flowing out of it into the system of lakes which has before been discovered by the explorer, and of which the Shambetsi, almost a system of rivers itself, is the largest affluent yet discovered. Should Dr. Livingston's hypothesis of an affluent from the west shore of Tanganyika Lake not be sustained, and its waters found to procure outlet by Lake Nyasa and the Zambezi, his future discoveries will in all probability show a similar formation of the continent in East Central Africa to that which he discovered to be the fact when he explored Lake Dilolo on the land of Balanda. The explorers remained in Ujiji until after Merry Christmas. Both engaged much of the time in writing accounts of their explorations, which have appeared or will yet appear in this volume. Meanwhile, they had determined to make a journey together to Uniyembe. This journey is described in telegraphic brevity. And then there is a very small print telegraph. I guess I'll try to read it. Okay. This is like 7-point font, if not like 5. After spending Christmas at Ujiji, Dr. Livingston, escorted by the New York Herald expedition, composed of 40 Wangwana soldiers, well armed, left for Uniyembe on the 26th of December, 1871, in order to arrive safely, untroubled by wars and avaricious tribes. We sketch out a road to Uyembe thus: 7 days by water south of Uriemba, 10 days across the uninhabited forests of Kawendi, 20 days through Yukonongo direct east, 12 days north through Konongo, thence 5 days into Uniyembe, where we arrived without adventure of any kind except killing zebras, buffaloes, and giraffes. After 44 days' travel, the expedition suffered considerably from famine, and your correspondent from fever, but these are incidental to the march in this country. To the march in this country. Doctor trampled in on foot like a man of iron. On arrival at Unyembe, I found that the Englishman Shaw, whom I turned back as useless, had about a month after his return succumbed to the climate of the interior and had died. Oh goodness, Shaw died. As well as two Wangayana of the expedition who had been left behind sick. Thus, during less than 12 months, William Lawrence Farquhar of Leigh, Scotland, and John William Shaw of London, England, and two white men I had engaged to assist me had all died. Also, 8 baggage carriers and 8 soldiers of the expedition had died. I was bold enough to advise the doctor to permit the expedition to escort him to Yembe. Through the country it was made acquainted with while going to Ujiji, for the reason that were he to sit down at Ujiji until Miriambo was disposed of the he might remain a year there, a prey to high expectations, ending always in bitter disappointment. I told him, as the Arabs of Unyembe were not equal to the task of conquering Miriambo, that it were better he should accompany the Herald expedition to Unyembe and there take possession of the last lot of goods brought to him by a caravan which left the seacoast simultaneously with our expedition. The doctor consented, and thus it was that he came so far back as Unyanyembe. So ends the telegram. The Herald correspondent complains with much earnestness that Dr. Livingston has been neglected by the British consulate at Zanzibar, handsomely admitting the liberality of the British people and government. He has hearty denunciations for those in authority at Zanzibar. The contrast of their insufficiency with the enterprise of the Herald expedition is remarkable. Mr. Stanley says, within the time that the British consul's men took to convey Livingston's goods and letters a distance of only 525 miles, the Herald expedition was formed and marched 2,059 English statute miles, and before the 14th month of its departure from the seacoast, the Herald expedition will have arrived at the seacoast, be paid off and disbanded. In the matter of supplies then being sent to Livingston semi-annually or annually, there is no truth whatever. The cause is extreme apathy at Zanzibar and the reckless character of the men sent. Where English gentlemen are so liberal with them and money so plentiful, it should be otherwise.